for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
Today, based on information developed by that investigation, a Fulton County grand jury returned a true bill of indictment, charging 19 individuals with violations of Georgia law arising from a criminal conspiracy to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election in this state. The indictment includes 41 felony counts and is 97 pages long. Please remember that everyone charged in this bill of indictment is presumed innocent. Specifically, the indictment brings felony charges against Donald John Trump, Rudolph William Louis Giuliani, John Charles Eastman, Mark Randall Meadows, John Cheeseborough, Jeffrey Clark, Jenna Lynn Ellis, Ray Stallings Smith III, Robert David Cheeley, Michael A. Roman, David James Schaefer, Sean Micah Tresher Steele, Stephen Cliffgard Lee, Harrison William Prescott Floyd, Travion C. Cootie, Sydney Catherine Powell, Kathleen Austin Latham, Scott Graham Hall, and Misty Hampton, also known as Emily Misty Hayes.
And that's a listing of the 19 defendants, and Donald Trump heads the list again as District Attorney Fani Willis has charged Trump with violations of the RICO Act in trying to steal the 2020 election. As Peaches and Herb would say, re-indicted and it feels so good. Oh, yeah. Welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. I'm Darren Gibson, your host today. We're going to spend most of the show talking about the latest indictment against Donald Trump. We'll try to get to some other news as well, but before we get started with today's topics, a couple of reminders. You can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on X at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube and Mastodon by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. And you can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Podvine, and Pandora by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, X, Tumblr, YouTube, and Mastodon accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern. And you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and WMTB in St. Petersburg, Florida. So be sure to listen to us on your local Pacifica affiliate. We're recording this show on Wednesday, August 16th, 2023. What a banner day. It went into the night, Monday night. Charges were filed. They were sent to the judge in the case. He signed the paperwork, and it was sent off to the clerk's office at about 10 o'clock Monday evening, and we didn't really get anything until in the overnight hours. They said it would take, at worst case, 3 hours. I don't know how long it took. I couldn't stay up that long, but I am just itching with excitement over this one. So let's get to our first story. This is Kate Brumback and Eric Tucker writing for the Associated Press, dated August 15th, out of Atlanta. Donald Trump and 18 allies were indicted in Georgia on Monday over their efforts to overturn his 2020 election loss in the state, with prosecutors using a statute normally associated with mobsters to accuse Trump, lawyers, and other aides of a criminal enterprise to keep him in power. The nearly 100-page indictment details dozens of acts by Trump or his allies to undo his defeat, including beseeching Georgia's Republican Secretary of State to find enough votes for him to win the battleground state, harassing an election worker who faced false claims of fraud, and attempting to persuade Georgia lawmakers to ignore the will of voters and appoint a new slate of electoral college electors favorable to Trump. In one particularly brazen episode, it also outlines a plot involving one of his lawyers to access voting machines in a rural Georgia county and steal data from a voting machine company. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, whose office brought the case, said at a late-night news conference, quote, "The indictment alleges that rather than abide by Georgia's legal process for election challenges, the defendants engaged in a criminal racketeering enterprise to overturn Georgia's presidential election result." End of quote. Other defendants include former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, as we mentioned, Trump attorney and former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, and a Trump administration Justice Department official, Jeffrey Clark, who aided the then president's efforts to undo his election loss in Georgia. Other lawyers who advanced legally dubious ideas to overturn the results included John Eastman, Sidney Powell, and Kenneth Chesbrough. They were all also charged. Willis has given the defendants a timeline of noon, August 25th, to voluntarily surrender. Otherwise, they're going to get arrested, and I'm going to love it. She also said she plans to seek a trial date within 6 months and that she intends to try the defendants collectively. The indictment bookends a remarkable crush of criminal cases, 4 and 5 months, each in a different city, that would be daunting for anyone, never mind someone like Trump, who is simultaneously balancing the roles of criminal defendant and presidential candidate. It comes just 2 weeks after the Justice Department special counsel charged him in a vast conspiracy to overturn the election, underscoring how prosecutors, after lengthy investigations that followed the January 6, 2021 traitorous riot at the U.S. Capitol, have now, 2.5 years later, taken steps to hold Trump to account for an assault on the underpinnings of American democracy. I added traitorous because that's what those people were that day. They were and they are traitors. The Georgia case covers some of the same ground as Trump's recent indictment in Washington, including attempts he and his allies made to disrupt the electoral vote count at the Capitol. But in its sprawling web of defendants, 19 in total, the indictment stands apart from the more tightly targeted case brought by special counsel Jack Smith, which so far only names Trump as a defendant. In charging close Trump aides who were referenced by Smith only as unindicted co-conspirators, the Georgia indictment alleges a scale of criminal conduct extending far beyond just Trump. The indictment, with charges under the state's racketeering law and language conjuring the seedy underworld of mob bosses and gang leaders, accuses Trump, his former chief of staff, Trump's attorneys, and the former New York mayor of being members of a criminal organization and enterprise that operated in Georgia and other states. The indictment capped a chaotic day at the courthouse caused by the brief but mysterious posting on a county website of a list of criminal charges that were to be brought against Trump. Reuters, which published a copy of the document, said the filing was taken down quickly. A spokesperson for Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis said in the afternoon that it was inaccurate to say that an indictment had already been returned, but declined to comment further on a kerfluffle that the Trump legal team jumped on to attack the investigation's integrity. Trump and his allies, who have characterized the investigation as politically motivated, immediately seized on the apparent error to claim that the process was rigged. Trump's campaign aimed to fundraise off of it, sending out an email with the since-deleted document embedded. Yeah, because Trump's going to get all the suckers that he can to give him money, because that's how it works, folks. That's just exactly how it works. In a statement after the indictment was issued, Trump's legal team said, quote, The events that have unfolded today have been shocking and absurd, starting with the leak of a presumed and premature indictment before the witnesses had testified or the grand jurors had deliberated, and ending with the district attorney being unable to offer any explanation. End of quote. The lawyer said prosecutors presenting their case, quote, relied on witnesses who harbor their own personal and political interests, some of whom ran campaigns touting their efforts against the accused. End of quote. Really, that's what he says. They're all Republicans that are giving you this grief, Donnie. It's not the Democrats, it's your fellow Republicans who are tired of you. Trump responded to the indictment Tuesday by announcing a news conference for next week to present yet another, quote, almost complete, end of quote, report on the alleged fraud that he has yet to prove nearly 3 years after the 2020 election. Yeah, you know what that's going to be filled with? That right there. It's going to be filled with bullshit. Many of the 161 acts by Trump and his associates outlined in the Georgia indictment have already received widespread attention. That includes a January 2nd, 2021 call in which Trump urged Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to find the 11,780 votes needed to overturn his election loss. Prosecutors said that call violated a Georgia law against soliciting a public official to violate their oath. It also accuses Trump of making false statements and writings for a series of claims he made Raffensperger and other state election officials, including that up to 300,000 ballots, quote, were dropped mysteriously into the rolls, end of quote, in the 2020 election, that more than 4,500 people voted who weren't on registration lists, and that a Fulton County election worker, Ruby Freeman, was a, quote, professional vote scammer, end of quote. You know what all those claims are? Right there. More bullshit. Giuliani, meanwhile, is accused of making false statements for allegedly lying to lawmakers by claiming that more than 96,000 mail-in ballots were counted in Georgia, despite there being no record of them having been returned to a county elections office, and that a voting machine in Michigan wrongly recorded 6,000 votes for Biden that were actually cast for Trump. He's talking about Antrim County, and that was already corrected, and his claim totally debunked. In a statement, Giuliani did not respond directly to the allegations, but called the indictment, quote, an affront to American democracy, end of quote, and, quote, just the next chapter in a book of lies, end of quote. No, Giuliani's got the book of lies, and so does Trump. Also charged are individuals prosecutors say helped Trump and his allies on the ground in Georgia influence and intimidate election workers. One man, Stephen Cliffgard Lee, was charged for allegedly traveling to Freeman's home, quote, with intent to influence her testimony, end of quote. Freeman and her daughter, Shay Moss, testified to Congress last year about how Trump and his allies latched onto surveillance footage from November 2020 to accuse both women of committing voter fraud, allegations that were quickly debunked yet widespread across conservative media. Both women who are black faced death threats after the election. Yeah, they quit working as election volunteers because of the death threats. The indictment also accuses Powell and several co-defendants of tampering with voting machines in Coffee County, Georgia, and stealing data belonging to Dominion Voting Systems, a producer of tabulation machines that has long been the focus of conspiracy theories. An attorney for Powell declined to comment. According to the evidence made public by the Congressional Committee investigating the January 6th traitorous riot, once again I added the word traitorous, Trump allies targeted Coffee County in search of evidence to back their theories of widespread voter fraud, allegedly copying data and software. Besides the two election-related cases, Trump faces a separate federal indictment accusing him of illegally hoarding classified documents, as well as a New York State case charging him with falsifying business records. As indictments mount, Trump, the leading Republican candidate for president in 2024, often invokes his distinction as the only former president to face criminal charges. He is campaigning and fundraising around these themes, portraying himself as the victim of Democratic prosecutors out to get him, which is absolute total bullshit. It's not the prosecutors, it's the grand jury going after you, Donnie. Republican allies once again quickly rallied to Trump's defense. Of course they would, because they're a bunch of crooks too. All of them. Traitorous, evil, violent, conservative traitors. I'll put it like this. If you're a fan of the Marvel Universe, Thanos was right. I'd wipe them half out with a snap of my fingers, baby, and they'd be all conservatives. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy wrote on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, quote, Americans see through this desperate sham, end of quote. No, what they see is you and your friends rallying around a bullshit artist. And that's exactly what Donald Trump is. He is a scammer. You know what Republicans do? They project and they gaslight. Project and gaslight. I'll keep saying that until I'm done with this show. Project and gaslight. Let's go to our next story. This is Christina A. Cassidy writing for the Associated Press. This is also dated August 15th out of Atlanta. This goes into a little bit more detail into the attempts to illegally access voting equipment. So this will be the interesting stuff here. This is the meat and potatoes of the indictment. A day after the January 6, 2021 traitorous attack on the U.S. Capitol, again, I added the word traitorous because that's what it was, as the country was still reeling from the violent attempt to halt the transfer of presidential power, a local Republican Party official greeted a group of computer experts outside the election office in a rural county in South Georgia, where they were given access to voting equipment. Their intent was to copy software and data from the election systems in an attempt to prove claims by Donald Trump and his allies that voting machines had been rigged to flip the 2020 election to his challenger, Democrat Joe Biden. That's according to the wide-ranging indictment issued late Monday night, which we just talked about. Going to skip down a little bit. The charges related to the breach of election equipment in Coffee County highlight that the pressure campaign by Trump and his allies didn't stop with state officials and lawmakers, but extended all the way down to local government. Relying on Georgia's racketeering law, the type of prosecution more typically associated with mobsters, the indictment alleges the events in Coffee County were part of a wider effort by Trump associates to illegally access voting equipment in multiple states. One of them being Michigan, by the way, which is being investigated by Special Prosecutor and Muskegon County Prosecutor D.J. Hilson. Lawrence Norton, an election security expert with the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU School of Law, said, quote, the one thing that Coffee County shows, and these other counties as well, is that the effort behind January 6th didn't stop on January 6th. The ongoing effort to undermine and sabotage elections has continued, end of quote. The security breach inside the election office in Coffee County, about 200 miles southeast of Atlanta, is among the first known attempts by Trump allies to access voting machines as they sought evidence to back up their unsubstantiated claims that such equipment had manipulated the presidential vote. It was followed a short time later by breaches in 3 Michigan counties involving some of the same people, and again in a western Colorado county that Trump handily won. While the county-level equipment breaches have raised alarms about election data falling into the wrong hands and prompted 2 other prosecutions, they were absent from the recent federal indictment of Trump alleging interference in the 2020 election. The Georgia case is the first to argue that the breaches were part of a conspiracy by Trump and his allies to overturn the results. 4 people face 6 counts related to the breach in Coffee County, including conspiracy to commit election fraud, conspiracy to commit computer theft, and conspiracy to defraud the state. They are lawyer and Trump ally Sidney Powell, former Coffee County Elections Director Missy Hampton, former Coffee County GOP Chair Kathy Latham, who also served as a false elector for Trump, and Scott Graham Hall, an Atlanta area bail bondsman who prosecutors say is associated with longtime Trump advisor David Bossie. A lawyer for Powell declined comment, while messages seeking responses from the others were not immediately returned. Of course not, because they're going to shut their mouth about it, because they know they're guilty. My opinion. Although Trump continues to promote his claims about the election, multiple reviews, audits, and recounts in the battleground states where he disputes his loss, including in Georgia, which counted the presidential ballots 3 times, have confirmed Biden's win. Trump's claims also were rejected by dozens of judges, including several he appointed. His attorney general and an exhaustive review by the Associated Press found no evidence of widespread fraud that could have changed the results. After the 2020 election, Trump and Powell pushed various conspiracy theories about voting machines, specifically related to the Dominion voting systems equipment used in Georgia. Dominion earlier this year reached a $787 million settlement with Fox Propaganda Channel over false claims aired on the network, including by Powell. Court documents in Georgia show Powell hired a forensic data firm on December 6, 2020, to collect and analyze Dominion equipment in Michigan and elsewhere, and prosecutors allege the breach of election equipment in Coffee County was, quote, subsequently performed under this agreement, end of quote. On January 7, 2021, Hall and employees of the data firm traveled to the election office to copy software and data from voting equipment and were greeted outside by Republican official Latham and then taken on a tour of the office by Elections Director Hampton. That is according to the indictment and video surveillance obtained in an unrelated case about Georgia's electronic voting machines. So, yes, there's video evidence of this. Later videos showed Hampton opening the office on January 18th when it was otherwise closed for the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. She allowed in Douglas Logan and Jeff Lenberg, both of whom have been active nationally in efforts to challenge the 2020 election and were part of the effort to examine voting machines in Michigan. Neither Logan nor Lenberg were charged in Monday's indictment, but they should be, my opinion. Logan's company, Cyber Ninjas, a Florida-based firm with little election experience, was later hired by Republican lawmakers in Arizona to conduct a review of the 2020 election in Maricopa County. It ultimately confirmed Biden's win, but claimed to find various irregularities, claims that election experts said were inaccurate, misleading, or based on a flawed understanding of the data. Wasn't it Cyber Ninjas that found bamboo shoots in the whatever? In Coffee County, the men worked late into the evening, returning the following day. Lenberg was also seen at the office on at least 3 more days later that month, according to information collected in the separate voting machine lawsuit. Hampton resigned soon after their visits amid allegations of fraudulent timesheets. So Hampton's a crook! There you go, folks. Crooks. They're all a bunch of liars and thieves. This week's indictment also mentions a December 18th, 2020 session in the Oval Office where Trump allies, including Powell and Michael Flynn, the former National Security Advisor, proposed ordering the military to seize voting machines and appoint a special prosecutor to investigate allegations of voter fraud in Georgia and other battleground states Trump lost. In Michigan, authorities have charged 3 people in connection with breaches in 3 counties, including former Republican State Attorney General candidate Matthew DePerno, who, along with the others, has pled not guilty. Yeah, one of the people they're not charging in the case, supposedly over lack of evidence, is Barry County Sheriff Dar Leaf. You know what I say? 3 words. Lock him up. So far, the special counsel assigned to the case has not charged any of the employees who handed over the voting equipment, nor has he charged those who were asked to analyze them. In a statement, the special counsel said they had been deceived. With Monday's indictment, Hampton becomes the second top county election official to be charged in connection with a security breach in their office. The first was Tina Peters, the former clerk in Mesa County, Colorado, who has emerged as a prominent figure among those who say voting machines are rigged. Both are no longer working in elections. Prosecutors allege Peters and her deputy were part of a deceptive scheme to provide unauthorized access to the county's voting systems during a May 2021 breach that eventually resulted in a copy of the voting system hard drive being posted online. Weeks afterward, Peters appeared at an event hosted by Trump ally Mike Lindell, the MyPillow CEO, who has been seeking to prove the 2020 election was stolen and has called for a ban on voting machines. Yeah, by the way, Mike Lindell starting to go bankrupt. He's had to sell a lot of his equipment and a lot of his pillows in an auction because his sales have gone way down. They've plummeted. Walmart stopped carrying his crap. So did Kohl's. So did a lot of online retailers. So I hope Mike Lindell goes right into the unemployment line. Peters is denied wrongdoing and faces trial later this year. Her deputy pleaded guilty to lesser charges as part of an agreement with prosecutors. Experts have described the unauthorized Colorado release as serious, saying it could provide a practice environment that would allow anyone to probe for vulnerabilities that could be exploited during a future election. Experts also worry it could be used to spread misinformation about voting equipment. Colorado's chief election official, Democratic Secretary of State Jenna Griswold, said accountability is crucial to deterring any future attempts to illegally access voting systems. She said, quote, "We cannot allow election officials to destroy elections from within," end of quote. And I agree with her 100%. This is just awful stuff here. And I tell you what, folks, got a surprise for you. Jack Prince, how are you?
Hey, Darren, doing well. Good to hear your voice.
Hey, I'm doing really good too. So you wanted to join me to talk about what's happening with the Grand Rapids Public Schools. And this has to do with an article that was published on July 19th by MLive saying that GRPS has more building space than it actually needs, but there's more to the story.
Yeah, there really is. And the yearly announcement that buildings have to be closed, if anybody's been paying attention, is consistently hitting just about this time of the year, just prior to the opening of schools, which you might wonder why they would wait. One would surmise maybe they just start looking at the financial figures and the amount of students that are coming and the amount of square footage, and they realize they're 30-40% district-wide with capacity. Some buildings 15-20%. But that's too late. It's too late at that time. And the only answer they can come up with is to close neighborhood schools. Mm-hmm. Now, the rest of the story, as you just insinuated, is that in the same school district, in the boundaries of the Grand Rapids Public School District, there are 21 charter schools. Anybody with a thumb can Google that. 21 charter schools. In Kent County, there are 28 charter schools. Those 21 charter schools have almost 9,000 students attending.
Wow.
9,000 students that prior to the proliferation of charter schools would be Grand Rapids Public School students. My research has it that that's almost the entire loss within the last 5 years. Now, there could be some more attrition when you think about COVID. There could be people possibly moving. Mm-hmm. But when you see a figure of 9,000 charter school students, almost equating the total loss in the last 5 years, it doesn't take an educational genius to realize what we predicted, what we warned the school district and the leaders in the Grand Rapids Public School District, both in the group called the GREJ. And on this very program, we warned the people, the public, that the Grand Rapids Public Schools' life was on the line because of charter schools. And we pointed out, one of the charter schools right across from Ray Freebed had been sanctioned by Grand Rapids Public Schools. That charter school now has about 300 students. It has its own superintendent. It has its own school board. It's not publicly elected. Has nothing to do with Grand Rapids Public Schools. But Grand Rapids Public Schools gave them the charter. Normally a college does that. Mm-hmm. So the damage that's happened is at the end of their own doings. They've shot themselves in the proverbial foot to the tune of 21 charter schools now in the city. Now, we can argue all day long, and it's become a bit of a political question. Is a charter school a public school? The answer to that is no, they're not.
Absolutely not.
The problem with that is, just like with the very disguised insurance entity called Medicare Advantage, that's not a public service.
No,
that's not a program that's public.
We call it Medicare Disadvantage on this show.
So the conservatives have learned, if you put a moniker on a private entity and put public in the name, you have no opposition. Nobody can claim that privatization or private business in the military, in the post office, in education, in any institution is bad because it's public they maintain. It is public when in fact it's not public. There was a lawsuit 1 year after Engler passed legislation that said charter schools could be called public. A number of high-ranking educators went to court. A judge ruled in their favor and said that Engler, they could not call charter schools public schools. But after 3 more attempts and millions of private money, and we know who's behind that private money, in the personage of Betsy DeVos, guess what happened? They lost the court case, and now because of that, just like George Bush did with the name Medicare Advantage, people are walking around thinking, there's not 21 charter schools in the Grand Rapids District. They're all public schools. They're not. They have a non-elected school board that has been proven to favor their relatives, their friends with contracts. If they want to have food brought in, if they want the lawn done, if they want a new roof on, over and over again, there's nepotism in that funding because guess what? They are not protecting the public interest. They're padding their own relatives with jobs, with contracts, and that's just a small segment. I don't want to take much more time explaining why they're not public, but they're not. Yeah, you might also go ahead.
If they don't have a publicly elected school board, they are not a public school. Period. End of story.
Exactly. And they don't contribute to the retirement fund. So what happens there is that the public school candidate at 23 years of age, sitting out of Grand Valley, looks upon the educational career path, and that golden parachute called a pension is being slowly swallowed up because there's less and less public contribution being made. Mm-hmm. It only makes sense if there's 8.2 thousand students going to charter schools. The state allotment per student today is almost 10,000. You can multiply 10,000 times, let's round it off to 9,000. You've got $90 million just in one school district that's being diverted from public schools. $90 million.
Yep.
The amount of teachers is diminished, so the amount of contribution to the pension fund is diminished. So the education departments across the state, the students are saying, hey, I don't know, I'll be a bartender. That will make me more money. Yeah. Since there's no pension any longer, why the hell not? Before, I would take a sacrifice for my pay. I would say, hey, the view is fine. I'm here in the building. I love helping kids, and I'm going to have a golden parachute retirement. You take that away, and now you can't get teachers. So the public schools are suffering even more. It's an entire circle. I'm heartbroken. I'm too old to really do a lot about it. I can protest. I can tell people at this stage, the battle is just raging by the conservatives, and you add into it today that the public school teacher is a pariah in that he supposedly or she is grooming children sexually. I know it sounds bizarre, but he or she is also, as a public school teacher, teaching this very dangerous thing called history. History that includes the Civil War, history that includes the Industrial Revolution, the rise of the unions in the 30s, the history that you were familiar with, Darren, as a student, and I was familiar with. You can't teach that now. And if you do, in many states, you're arrested. Yeah. You don't dare address abortion. You don't dare address sexual gender. So you tell me, what's really attractive to a teacher to go into public education today?
Not much. And especially in some states where these conservatives rule the roost, Not only could they get arrested, but they could have their teaching certificate removed, and guess what? That follows them everywhere they go.
Exactly.
Hey, Jack,
Yeah.
I want to read you this graphic here real quick. This is from the Grand Rapids the Grand Rapids Press.
You got it.
These are the top 10 Grand Rapids public schools with utilization by percentage. Let me read them off to you. Tell me what they all have in common. Museum High School has a utilization 143%. Their enrollment is 455. Their capacity is 319. They're over capacity. Blandford has 115% utilization. An enrollment of 62. Their capacity is 54. North Park Early Childhood Center, 100% utilization. Enrollment of 192. Capacity of 192. North Park Montessori, 84% utilization, enrollment of 385, a capacity of 456. Ridgemore Park, 80% utilization, an enrollment of 135, capacity of 168. The Zoo School, 79%, 64 enrolled, 81 capacity. C.A. Frost Elementary, 72%, enrollment of 430, capacity of 600. Shawmut Hills, 70% utilization. Enrollment of 267, capacity of 384. Mulek Park, utilization 69%. Enrollment of 233, capacity of 336. And the last one on the list, Grand Rapids Montessori at 68% utilization, 310 enrolled, 456 capacity. How many of those are charter schools?
The entire blanket. And even at that, Darren, let's consider another aspect of a charter school. The school that you mentioned at the top, Museum High School?
Yes.
Let's say, you know where the Museum High School is, right? It's kind of like downtown. Yeah, let's say the adjoining neighborhood. If you just go south towards Mary Free Bed and then over past the hospital into that neighborhood, okay? Now, I'm not going to denigrate the name of that neighborhood, but that used to be called the Hood. Those students, you would think, because that's geographically close to the museum school, would be able to attend the museum school.
So they're in the old public museum building, not the new one, correct?
Right.
Over on Jefferson.
On Jefferson, yes.
Yep, I know right where it is.
But the clientele, the composite of the population in that school has nothing to do with its geographical location because there's a lottery system. So there's a lottery system that supposedly is neutral, but for some unexplained reason, the students that are let in have a great academic power and ability. You have a building in, my grandson went to school there, in the old Cruston building, north of town, out by Cheshire Village. You know where that's at?
Yeah, right by, it's Plainfield, right by Ann Street, just south of Ann Street.
That was a public school. Those were the polar bears.
Oh, yes, remember? Absolutely.
That was a traditional Grand Rapids public school, and the students walked to school because it was a neighborhood school.
Yeah.
That has a high percentage of occupancy, and they have a grade point. My grandson was a valedictorian there, but there were 8 other valedictorians there. They had that many 4 points. So these are, but where do they come from? Do they live in the neighborhood? No, the students who live in the neighborhood now, they are bused, and they end up at Grand Rapids Central, which is downtown on the east side of Heritage Hill. You know where that's at. Yep. The old Grand Rapids Central High School. They don't have a neighborhood school. They're bussed out because Grand Rapids Public School said, well, our overall grade point is so terrible, we need to raise our grade point. So how did they do it, Darren? Did they hire better teachers that are at the top of their field and give them the best pay in Kent County? No, didn't do that. No, even though we suggested that. What they did is they kicked the public school to the curb, literally, bussed them over to Central, and made a magnet school in the beautiful Cruston building. My grandson lived in Kelloggsville. His classmates were scattered all over the peripheral of Grand Rapids Public Schools, so that they can go to a magnet school and they now can boast a very hefty grade point and college placement, but they're not indigenous Grand Rapids students. Where did the Grand Rapids students go that were in the Crested neighborhood? They're at Ottawa now. They're at Central. Check the occupancy rate percentage at Ottawa Hills High School. Do you have that with you?
Here are the schools that are the most underutilized. Number 1 on the list, Ken O'Shea Park, 18% utilization. They have 116 students. They have a capacity for 648. Number 2 on the list is Westwood Middle School at 19% utilization. They have 151 students. They can hold 810. 19%.
Those students are all bust. At Westwood Middle, those students are all bust from guess where? I know. I live a mile from there. I taught at Union right next door to Westwood Middle.
West side of Grand Rapids.
They're all bust from the areas where at one time there were neighborhood schools. Yep. But those now are all charter schools, like the college prep you mentioned. Mm-hmm. They come in by lottery. The discrimination that takes place, the academic discrimination, has forced busing all the way across town to Union, to Ottawa. But I'm curious, what the percentage of Ottawa? Keep going.
Ottawa Hills is number 3 on the list, 23% utilization. They're expected to have 382 students this fall. They can hold 1,653.
23%.
Not even a quarter.
Right. Because, see, it's not a charter school. It's not do I dare say, what's called a business/educational school. Grand Rapids, the city of Grand Rapids, is the mecca of the education business nexus. I repeat, it is the absolute mecca. It is the epitome of education and / business nexus. All of these schools that you mentioned that have high percentages, they're all what they call partner schools with Grand Rapids Public Schools. That means there's corporate money that goes in, and the corporate money makes a kind of school and gives them a ready-made curriculum. The insidious takeover of Grand Rapids Public Schools by charter schools, by private business enterprise, is so insidious, so secret, people don't realize. They scratch their head. Why do we have buildings with 15% occupancy? Why do we have the proud school of Ottawa down to 23%? And does anybody realize that Grand Rapids Public Schools buses students? What happened to the concept of the local public school? It's been obliterated because they make these specialized schools, they call them schools of choice, but the school of choice, guess whose choice it is to go there? Financially advantaged students with hefty grade point academic prowess. And as I said before, I watched it happen to my grandson.
Yep.
He lived 15 miles from Grand Rapids District, but he was allowed to go to a Grand Rapids Public Schools, which displaced a Grand Rapids Public native student into a 30-minute bus ride to a school that's filled with 23% of the people.
Let me give you the remaining of the 7 schools that are underutilized. Number 4 on that list is Sherwood Park, 23% utilization, 128 students this fall. They have a capacity of 552. Number 5 on the list, I believe you've taught here, Jack, Southeast Career Pathways, 26% utilization.
26%, yep.
93 students. They have a capacity for 360. Riverside is at 27%. They have 219 students. They can fit 810.
They bus their students.
And the last one, an elementary school that's real close to where I lived for a while, Stocking Elementary, 28% utilization. 142 students. They have a capacity of 504. Stocking is where I found out about 9/11. I went to go vote at Stocking Elementary the morning of September 11, 2001, and I heard Rick Beckett on WGRD radio in Grand Rapids talking about a plane hitting the World Trade Center.
These schools are essentially 3/4 empty. We can say they're 26 or 23% full, but you reverse that glass, that's 3/4 empty. They're virtually empty. Large buildings buildings that, if we go back 10 years ago, were filled.
Yeah.
With who? Well, where do they come from?
Yeah.
I mean, why these are in, how do I say, blooming areas as far as the apartments and the homes and so forth. There's no reason that they'd be empty, except for the fact that charter schools has slowly siphoned off the indigenous students of Grand Rapids Public Schools and replaced them with lottery students that come in. And by the way, the idea of a school door open and anybody that lives in the area can come and go was what you were raised with, and I was as well.
Yes.
That's gone. That's gone. I'm telling you, that's gone. That does not take place. It's a complete flip-flop.
Yep.
The Museum High School is made up of choice students, but the choice isn't their choice. It's the school decides who comes. Remember, charter schools have that right. A charter school does not have to take whoever strolls up the steps. They can make the decision of who they let in.
Yeah.
You'll notice they don't let academic challenged or autistic students, students that have special needs, because they're too damn expensive. Yeah. And they don't show well when the district reports its grade points, its reading levels. So we don't want them in these charter schools. Even with all that, the charter school nationwide right now has no better numbers with academic production than the public schools, even though they don't let, quote, quote, the undesirable academic student in the door.
Hey, Jack, can I give you a list of the factors that Grand Rapids Public Schools told the Grand Rapids Press that why the enrollment is declining?
Right. Before you read that, notice, ladies and gentlemen, the last reason that they give, not the first reason they give, the one that you hear, that's the last cause of declining enrollment. Go ahead.
Yep.
Sorry.
The first one is a lack of affordable housing. What do you think about that?
Well, the affordable housing, was housing more affordable 10 years ago? No, not really. These were districts and areas where the minority students lived, and they still live. They just don't go to school. Now, let me ask you a question. Is that not a problem within a problem? Are we
exactly?
Yeah, we're compounding the difficulty of the city coming up with sensible ideas for housing. And so, yes, that does have a genuine effect on enrollment. There's no question about it. But that's like saying, hey, you got a problem with your house because we've thrown paint on the side of it and it's not very desirable. So what are you going to do? You're going to blame us? The city seers should have some answer to that if they really care about the longevity of the public school system.
Yeah. The second reason they gave is declining birth rates in Kent County and across the state.
Okay.
Which I can see that because guess who's having babies and guess who isn't? Who isn't having babies? People who are highly educated are waiting and waiting until their 30s to have children. You know who's having children now? Lower educated, I would say financially poor people. Well,
isn't that in contradiction with logic then?
Yeah.
What do we have? A lot of grad students that live in the so-called hood? In the 04 zip code? Yeah. No, we don't.
No. The third reason they gave is the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, supposedly the pandemic's over if you ask any conservative out there. What does that have to do with it?
Do students die? No, far from it.
No. Here's the last reason. This is the one I know you want to just bite your teeth into. More school options in the area. And guess where those options came from? Charter schools.
Yeah, but notice the terminology saying more school options. They also like, thanks to the conservative lexicon, to call that school of choice. And the leaders at Grand Rapids Public Schools will tell you they were the pioneers of school of choice. And why were they the pioneers of school of choice? Because Betsy DeVos's very intelligent strategist said, how are we going to break up the public school? We'll use it as a model. When I taught at Grand Rapids Public Schools, many times I would pass Betsy DeVos walking the halls of Grand Rapids Public Schools. You say, what the hell was she doing there? She would sit in. I saw her sit into PDs. I saw her sit into classroom meetings with teachers because what she viewed Grand Rapids Public Schools as was a little test tube. A little test tube where she could employ her strategies, one of which was to use the term, just like England used the term that they're public schools, she used the term choice. And what is DeSantis and all of these nuts going to the school boards? What is their mantra today, Darren?
Choice.
Choice. Sure.
But you're not really getting a choice in Florida because you can't be taught about slavery. You can't say gay. You can't do any of it.
No. And the minority student sitting down on Rigsby Street or downtown Grand Rapids doesn't have the ability to get into Blandford. Mm-hmm. Doesn't have the ability to rig the so-called lottery, which is a cover-up for choice. But whose choice? The individual school picks its, just like a farm team, picks its students. Yeah. So the choice is in the administration of these local schools, like Blandford, like Montessori, like the Zoo School, like C.A. Frost, City High School.
Yeah.
City High School isn't indigenous. City High School is chosen by a board of selectors that say, hey, we're going to let this young man in from Kellogg's go. We're going to let this person from Forest Hills come over here. We're going to boast that we have, I think they said they had the third best school in the state last year. I saw the signs around town that City High School was his third. Maybe it was the first. Maybe it was rated number one. But they tailor-made a school. It's much like the old Little League coaches that would take all the best players, and have one team that was excellent.
I was just going to use the analogy of the NFL draft because I know you've coached high school and college football in the past. It is. Yeah. It's like the NFL draft. We select this player first in the draft. We select this one second. This team selects this one third. That's all it is.
Yeah. And folks, we've said many times, when fascism comes to America, it'll be the cross and the Bible wrapped with a flag. That wasn't our creation. But we've repeated that. And let me say that the advent and the end of public schools will be exactly like what you see in Grand Rapids Public. It will still be called public. It's like a petrified tree. It will look like a public school. It'll have a sign that says it's public, but it won't be public. They will have the ability to choose the curriculums that they want. They will have the ability by their school board to do whatever the hell they want for admission and for expulsion, and they are not public schools. They're called public schools, but they're not. So the takeover will be completely unnoticed. You won't even, nobody in Grand Rapids knows it. Have you heard any leaders stand up in the city commission meetings? Does anybody realize that Grand Rapids Public Schools is being transformed into a privatized system that's really run by corporations? No, they boast on it.
No, you'll never hear that at a Grand Rapids City Commission meeting.
No, you won't.
Never.
Some people have smelled the coffee to the degree to realize there is a war going on against public schools. I guess the group called Moms for Liberty and so forth, a nationwide group that attacks school boards, that attack teachers. I guess some people, they've been so dramatic that some people have noticed them. But that's not the insidious takeover that happened in Grand Rapids Public and that is happening and continue to happen. There is a war taking place. They want education to be a private enterprise. They want it to be such a private enterprise they can block actual history. They can block what was the teacher's responsibility to make their own curriculum, because now guess where the curriculum comes from? And this is happening right now. This is happening in Ottawa. I know this right now. The curriculum is not, it used to be a group of teachers in the summer that would get together, have lunch together, and they would plan the English curriculum. I sat in on them. The books that would be read, the overall objectives, what is it that we want to take place with grammar, and they would make a year's curriculum. Now it's purchased. Mm-hmm. It's bought by private corporations that make money on it.
Yeah.
Now, why is that? To give a break to the teachers? No. There's an objective within the corporate world of what they want students to know. What did Carlin say education really was?
what they're doing is these private companies are propagandizing your students, your children, folks, into what they want your kids to learn.
Exactly.
Not what they should be learning. It's all propaganda. It really is. Like Carlin said, don't look for it to change. Be happy with what you got, because the owners of this country don't want that.
Exactly right. Do you think that the corporate world wants an accurate history here in Michigan of the Flint strikes?
No.
Of the parents that went out and had their jaws broken by the police and by the corporate goons that stood there because they were fighting for a weekend off, or they were fighting for pregnancy leave for pregnant women? Do you think that history is going to be taught? Corporate world has no interest in promulgating that history or any other history. There are histories of brave strikes down in West Virginia where the workers organized and the women fought next to the men. Do you think you're going to hear about those strikes? No. You're going to hear about the strike out in Colorado where the miners struck and the corporations hired a bunch of goons and surrounded a valley of miners that were striking, and the women dug caves under the tents for the kids to hide. So what did the corporations and the National Guard do? They set fire. That's called the Ludlow Massacre. That was hidden for years. Going for Woody Guthrie, nobody even hear about it. Do you think the curriculum is going to be sopping that up, sponging all those stories up? Hell no. They're not going to be there.
No.
That's the danger of handing over education to corporations. And Grand Rapids boasts about it. It is the epitome of the nexus between education and corporations. There was a time when the education departments in Ann Arbor and in East Lansing had doctors of education that they would decide what the curriculum would be, what they would influence textbooks with. Now they're boardrooms. Now they're corporations around the United States. One of them is from the Koch brothers. They have whole curriculum offered for free. I saw it. Come right to Grand Rapids Union High School. Atlas Shrugged, you know the books, all the propaganda, The Greed is Good from Ayn Rand, which it was corporate pablum. You could get it for free. You couldn't teach the jungle. You couldn't teach about the meatpacking business in Chicago, where they would lie to immigrants and say, we'll give you a house if you work here. And then as soon as they missed a payment, took it away. You know, that great expository of corporate greed and corruption. That ain't going to be taught. No. Hell no. I know that won't be taught.
No.
You hand it over to the corporations and the conservative interest, and you're going to get exactly what DeSantis wanted. Something that will not upset children. Something that will only aggrandize the United States of America. We're not going to talk about the massacres. We're not going to talk about the strikes that were busted up with violence against the workers. No, ain't going to talk about it. We'll only wave the flag.
Their excuse is not to upset the children. The real people they don't want to upset are the rich.
Exactly.
All right, everybody. We'll be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson.
I am Jack Prince. Thank you, Darren.
Yep, you're welcome. Please support independent media, the First Amendment, and a woman's right to choose.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.